So in this video I'm going to talk about trains of thought, because lately I've been writing my trains of thought on my notes, because I realized reviewing my notes here that out of context notes don't really work for me, because I look at the note and I look at it and I think, what the fuck was I thinking when I wrote this? And I can't really remember why, what was going on in my mind, so I can't really execute on that note, I guess, or there are out of context notes that I don't remember why I wrote them, so I know they're ideas for something, but I'm not exactly sure for what purpose, right? So I don't mind that they're there, and the ones I do have right now, I will keep them in case I review them in the future and they spark something. But the thing that I'm doing now to prevent that from happening more is to drop some context on the note. But what I realized dropping the context is that it's actually relatively complicated because it goes kind of far away, right? And the place where the thought started is really different than the thought I really noted down. So I found it funny to relay some thoughts, some trains of thought of mine in this video. This is the first one, and the thought is K-pop fandom as people, right? That's the first line of my note, and then I realized, what the fuck do I mean by this, right? So I started with my train of thought, and the beginning of the train of thought that I wrote, it probably started earlier, I don't really remember, but this is what I wrote. Made up lasering clinic scenario where the laser tech asked some questions like, why are you here? And I explained, etc. And she, I assume, because I guess most laser technicians are women, but and she found it interesting to hear that. Then she found it interesting to hear. Then I tied that into me making videos in English about stuff like that, right? Because explaining why are you here and all this kind of ties somehow into me explaining my YouTube videos, right? I don't know, I guess it's something. Then I thought of how I would say stuff like learn English first to someone, because I do have a video called why in English, right? So I was thinking into what has brought me success, right? And if there's one thing that brought me success, I guess, is learning English, right? So that was the thought that I had at that moment. As you can see, it doesn't really make any sense, and there are loosely tied thoughts, but and then I thought, well, I wouldn't need to say this to Gen Z, right? Because Gen Z is already kind of more integrated into languages because of TikTok transcription and all that, and automatic translation and all these things. There is less friction towards consuming certain stuff like international content, and you often see Latino people or something like that leaving comments in Spanish on random viral videos that are in English, right? And there are also many videos in French or something where people are I didn't know I understood French in in English, or sometimes in Spanish, or sometimes in German and all that, right? Then I thought of how K-pop interactions are kind of proof of that, right? Because it must be interesting to be deep into a fandom that you don't really speak the language of, right? You don't K-pop fans in the US, or K-pop fans here in Spain, or wherever, everywhere but Korea, they don't really understand it, right? I'm talking most K-pop fans, by virtue of it being a big fandom, don't really speak Korean well, right? There must be some people who spoke Korean and who are now fluent and all that, thanks to being interested in K-pop and all that. But those are probably the very small minority. Most people into K-pop must speak zero outside of Korea, obviously, must speak zero Korean, right? Or saranghae, or 3 words maybe, or very few words. So it must be interesting to be in that fandom, right? Because I'm a Taylor Swift fan, but I do speak English, right? And I understand the songs not, I wouldn't say deeply or whatever, but that I speak the language. I do understand the song when I read it, right? Or when I read the lyrics, or when I listen to it. usually read it, because on listen I kind of like the lyrics kind of fade away, but yeah, when I read it I like understand what the song means, and like I get the the wordplay and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like that. It must be interesting to like engage in deeply with translated content. It's like there's this barrier of like, because I see this often, right? On the Taylor Swift fandom as well, right? There are like Taylor Swift fandoms from Spain, like Taylor Swift fans from Spain, who don't really speak English, and who, when they encounter like some post by Taylor Nation or something like that, they are like, what does that say? Like, what is she saying, right? And or like, can someone translate and all that? And yeah, people do it. But it must be like interesting to be like so deep into someone and like so interested in something that you need this translation barrier towards, right? And that was my K-pop fandom as people. That's what I meant with K-pop fandom as people. I wanted to pay attention to those kind of people, right? And how interesting that phenomenon is. That was my first thought, and the previous train that came before it. So now, the second thought: breaking the violence cycle. I didn't write this thought like this. I started writing the train of thought because that was like that was like the thing that I went to my notes app to write about, because I was like, what the fuck am I thinking, right? This one was more of a case of like, rather than me finding the thought at the end interesting, it was like me realizing where that thought came from in the first place that I found interesting, right? I found the train of thought itself interesting. So yeah, I was like reading a book. This was very, very recently. I was reading a book about copywriting from a guy that I found on a podcast, and the podcast had this kind of title of making 200,000 per month or something like this. In Spanish, it was. It's a book in Spanish. The train of thought was in Spanish, but I translated it here. So yeah, there is also this program in Spain where they talk about, where the host asks famous, like he asks like two questions, like how much did you fuck last month, and how much money do you have in the bank, or like what's your net worth. He changes it up depending on like the person, because most people, like, their net worth is kind of the money that they have in the bank, right? Because most guests of the podcast who usually are like young actors or like young singers and all this, young people usually don't have like a mortgage or something like this. So when an older guest comes in, he sometimes makes the caveat of like, what's your net worth or something like this. But yeah, so yeah, he does that question often. So whenever I think of money, I usually kind of think of me answering that question in that show, right? Like, how would I answer it? So I kind of put myself in a place where I was already like making a lot of money in that kind of sense, and I was like, you guys don't know about money, right? I was like, yeah, the informational advantage is very important. It's actually very simple, right? You just need to multiply 2,000 people by 100, because that's like how the guy who I'm reading like explained it or something. He has like 2,000 people who he charges 100 euros per month to each person. So he makes 200,000 per month, right? Like easy, after taxes less, but yeah, that's like the revenue, I guess, of the business or whatever. So yeah, I was like, that's interesting. Like, I was like somehow explaining that in that program. Then yeah, I thought of like the host's portfolio, and I was like explaining, okay, yeah, my portfolio. Yeah, then I started thinking, yeah, if I went there, I would kind of try to find what his portfolio is. Like, I would go with my homework done in order to be able to like say these things, right? In order to say like, I want to have like the informational advantage, I would like make the example of like finding the informational advantage and try to like look up how much is his house worth and how many houses does he have, and like if he has it as like himself, or if he has them as in a society company, in a corporation or something like that. Then I was like, you guys don't know about money or something. And yeah, for example, like from the person who is cleaning the show, like the theater, because in the credits of the show they list like the person who cleans they have like two cleaning ladies, and they list them in the credits of the show. To the guy in realization, like he's called like Miguel. He does like kind of funny shit on funny overlays and all that kind of all those things. Yeah, I will be like, only you, David, because he does actually probably know about money, and he has this production company who is that's called Encofrados Encofrasa, which I find pretty funny because it's like a classic Spanish company name of encofrados, which are like these cement kind of structures that go before you make the house. You make this kind of, no, that's cimientos. That's another thing. But encofrados are like, how you make houses, they are made with this kind of cement technique. I forgot the word for like that kind of cement for like the encofrado. It's like the cement that has steel in it. Hormigón armado, it's called in Spanish. Reinforced rebar, I think. Rebar the concrete, I think it's called. So it's like essentially the company name of his production company for his show is called Encofrados Encofrasa. So it would be like if Jimmy Fallon's company was called, I don't know, Rebar, Reformations and Rebar or something like this, right? Like Re-Co, like from like Rebar Co. If like his production company was called Rebar Co or something like this. So I find that funny. So I would be like, you actually know about money, but the rest of you guys don't know. So that's what I do if I went to that kind of show, right? And I would be like, actually, this advice, like not advice, but like this kind of business model of like, multiplying 2,000 by 100 applies to like 97.5% of people, right? Because in a bell curve, like of a 95% of like, I don't know what the 95% is. It's like 2 standard deviations or something like this, or 1, I don't know. So you have like 2.5% to one side and 2.5% of outliers that earn very little money and 2.5% of outsiders that earn a lot of money. Right? So it would be like 97.5%, like this kind of side of the thing where you are not like absolute lowest poverty individual. All of those, you could do this kind of, you could get like, you could pay me $100 per month, right? If you really wanted, you could. That would be like my speech there or something like that. Like there are other limiting things, like Alex Hormozy is like this kind of guru or something, like business guru or something like that, and he says something like, success is behind a couple of hard conversations, right? And I would be like, if you guys went less to Gino's or to TGB, which are like 2 franchise restaurants to which I go to, and went to the park, or if it rains, you guys talk to your parents or something like that to be able to stay in your house or anything, then you could pay like this kind of money to get my wisdom or whatever, right? Then I thought, but this thing doesn't apply to like the lowest 2.5%, because like the really, really, really low income people, those can't really pay $100 per month. Like those are excluded from this speech, right? And then I thought of those people, like how, like if I went to Latin America, because someone I know has roots there in Latin America, so it was like kind of the first thought that sprung to mind when thinking of these kind of disadvantaged people. I was like, if I went there, I would have to be careful about getting jumped, because I'm a public figure and I've just been like talking about money on this show. So then I could risk being kidnapped, and then the kidnappers could get killed because I'm a popular figure. So I have like goodwill between the people. So some killers would like kill those kidnappers for kidnapping me, right? Because they respect me or something. And then, and I've built like goodwill because of these kind of public appearances or whatever. But realizing that would just continue the cycle, right? Because those killers would get their families killed and all those kind of things. So I would have to like make a message about breaking the cycle, right? Breaking the cycle of violence and like telling them to take the L's, right? No, you have to now take the losses that will come, and you guys have to be like the bigger ones and break the cycle, right? And you have to mourn those losses, but you have to do it as in, you have to mourn and not get revenge, because that would be like the right thing to do. And that that was my second train of thought. I don't know. I found it funny because I ended up thinking about this kind of cycle of violence and all this, and I started like reading a book about copywriting from some guy that was making like $200,000 per month or something like this. Which I guess it kind of like it has its ties, right? It's like wealth inequality, public figures, or that kind of thing. It kind of makes sense, right? But on the other hand, it doesn't really make sense. And then the third thought that I had was like, why am I thinking? This is another thought that I wrote because I was like, why the fuck am I thinking about this? Right? So it was like, why am I thinking about the M30 road? La M30, it's a road in Madrid that like surrounds Madrid. In my hotel room in Marrakech. I was in Marrakech in my hotel room, like alone, because my friends were like down in like the little pool that we had, and I was writing. So yeah, I stopped writing and I got my phone somehow. I don't know, and I started thinking about this. And yeah, I was in Marrakech, and I was thinking, what will we do tonight, right? And in my head I was going to like, I was asking my friends in my head, if you guys are feeling adventurous, which they weren't usually, we could do like the second Senegalese place downstairs, because even if it was Marrakech, like there was like some Senegalese restaurant like literally in our same street, and it was like a really kind of not shady, but yeah, this really that you can tell that it's not a place for tourists, right? It's a place for like people from down there or something like this, right? So even if it's close to like touristic destination and like inside the Medina and all this, you can tell that it was a place that's not really meant for tourists to ask for. Like you could see that the things are in French and all that, but because I guess Senegalese people know French, but it's not French as in for tourists. That was my impression. And then I would be like trying to speak French and all that to the Senegalese people, and yeah, I would talk to the Senegalese people about. I actually have eaten like Senegalese food, but in Madrid, and then I would like explain that it was in the barrio in Lavapiés, which is like a neighborhood that is really international and has like a lot of immigration and all that. So it has like Senegalese places, it has like a lot of Indian food restaurants and all that, right? So I would then explain kind of like because all Senegalese people or like all African people apparently like know Real Madrid. So I would use like the Santiago Bernabeu stadium as like the reference, right? So I would be like, yeah, actually Lavapiés is like centro de Madrid, is like the city center. It's kind of below the Santiago Bernabeu, because Santiago Bernabeu is kind of in the north part. It's considered city center, but it's considered center because of the M30, right? So that's how I started thinking of the M30, because the M30 like surrounds Madrid, but in the north is actually like really far north when the M30 ends. And the Santiago Bernabeu is like pretty center, but kind of actually far from what's considered center, right? So it's pretty north. Yeah. And that's how I ended up thinking about the M30 in Marrakech. And that's the third train of thought, and yeah, that's the last one of the day. And I wanted to leave it at that. And yeah, this is... Yeah, actually, since this is a video about Marrakech, since I mentioned the Marrakech thing, you could, I guess, watch a video of Marrakech that I made. Yeah, these are like some thoughts I had in Marrakech. You can watch them here. Bye.